It's time to talk about Oraxia, which of course means this video contains strong spider themes. Aside from webbing your enemies and seeding them with your brood, just how effective is Oraxia and what builds work for her? I'm TheKengineer, let's solve a practical problem. Oraxia's kit on the surface is relatively simple. Her passive is Invisibility for 8 seconds on beginning even the slightest wall latch with a refreshable duration. Holding your latch does not extend the duration, but a brief hop on the wall or zip to another perch will reset the time. Oraxia's first ability is Mercy's Kiss. This is a targeted leap attack to deal high damage for a first ability, with guaranteed lethal hit if the target is below half health. That is specifically health, ignoring shields and overguard entirely. Any shield damage will not contribute to the one-shot threshold, while pure toxin damage to health can bring them below the 50% even if the enemy still has full shields. Enemies open to Mercy finishers can also be one-shot this way, with the leap attack counting as a Mercy kill for all paras on mods. The targeting is exceptionally forgiving. If you target a cluster of enemies where only one of them is marked, you'll still hit the marked enemy even if your reticle is focused on a different, very nearby enemy. If an enemy dies to Mercy's Kiss, you get a lot of orbs, starting at 2 health orbs and a 25% chance of an energy orb, scaling with strength. This is particularly great for orb-based features like equilibrium and health conversion. This feature is also very forgiving. So long as you cast the ability to make the leap, it doesn't matter if the target dies to the ability or to something else mid-leap. You still get the orbs in full. Something to be aware of with this ability is how Mercy thresholds work. Xmas units can be Mercy killed at 80% health normally, while shielded heavy units start with a 60% health threshold, and unshielded heavy units have a 40% health threshold. You can increase all of these by 8 points per impact proc to a max of a 40 point increase. However, once you hit level 150 enemies, these minimum thresholds start to drop. Every level above 150 drops the minimum by 0.2% for heavy units and 0.4% for Xmas units. By level 300, Xmas units hit their minimum of just 20% of max health, and unshielded heavy units all the way down to 10% of max health. Shielded heavy units cap out at level 350, with again 20% of max health. While you can still use impact procs to raise these thresholds, it means that easy activation of Mercy with impact is largely removed when you jump from Steel Path levels to Archimedia levels. If you've ever struggled to get Mercy kills on Xmas and heavy units in Archimedia, this is part of the reason. In Oraxia's case, the 50% health threshold saves you from some of this pain. You won't need to max out impact procs in Xmas and can still one-shot other units, ignoring any damage attenuation a basic unit like a Dedicant may have. Mini-boss and boss units usually cannot be one-shot. This includes all Demolishers and all Acolytes. Summoned Necromechs, however, so long as they're not a Demolisher, can be one-shot by Mercy's Kiss once below 50% health. This effectively halves the time to kill them. Watch for the opening symbol and take them out. Oraxia's second ability is Webbed Embrace. She throws out a projectile until it contacts the surface. From that point, it creates a webbing zone, expanding to full size in a couple seconds. The zone appears to pass through all terrain for radial coverage, but is actually limited to line of sight. Bugs aside. Any enemy in range and line of sight becomes trapped in webbed cocoons. This not only hard controls them, preventing all actions, but also makes them more vulnerable to damage, a direct multiplier to any damage anyone would deal to them. As the zone lasts for the full ability duration, enemies which enter the area after it's created, or become vulnerable to it while in the area like with overguard breaking, will also be affected. When this happens, they will be slowed for a couple seconds first, and then become webbed. This gives enemies enough time to spread into the zone a bit, rather than body blocking the enemies behind them from getting stuck in your trap too. In tight choke points where there's the slightest line of sight to the origin point of the web, this prevents one enemy, saving all the others from your ability. Crowd control immune enemies, meaning they can't be webbed, are also immune to the damage vulnerability effect. You get no damage bonus against overguard and boss units this way. The benefits of crowd control and damage buffs are obvious, especially as a persistent zone. The only limitation is that Oraxia can have just 3 zones active at once. Should she create a 4th, the oldest zone vanishes and any enemies trapped by it are freed a couple seconds later. When subsumed to the helmet system, Oraxia shares this ability, but with 2/3 the normal radius, meaning 44% the area covered. While it's a smaller control radius than some other helmet abilities, its multiple persistent zones, coupled with ideal placement and damage vulnerability, make it a comfy, multi-function control ability. Oraxia's third ability is Widow's Brood. She launches a series of toxic darts in a tight cone, striking enemies in line of sight up to the maximum range. These darts carry very low damage. Despite being treated as both ability damage and weapon projectiles, enabling various buffs, this is not a direct damage ability. The dart damage does lead to a lot of toxin procs which, with appropriate buffs, can do a usable amount of damage. Also, the toxin will trigger Archon continuity for corrosive procs on top. But by far the most important is the darts seed the enemies. On death by any means, a seeded enemy will erupt with a Scuttler. This summoned creature will automatically fight for you, attacking nearby enemies with melee strikes. Each strike has a 100% status chance for their innate toxin damage and a forced impact proc on top. When in range, Scuttlers can hit up to 3.5 times per second from testing, though in practice will do less as they move into position around active enemies. You can reliably expect them to hit about 2.5 times per second on most targets. Scuttlers have a base damage of 50, increased by their level using the enemy damage scaling formula. Scuttlers spawn at either the mission level or your Warframes level, whichever is higher. Do note that mission level does not increase as time goes on, so the scaling of their damage is fixed the moment you load in. This still keeps them more relevant than a flat damage value. The trade-off is that Scuttler damage is not enhanced by strength. You could still use strength to help them in other ways, like the damage vulnerability from Webbed Embrace, or from subsumed abilities like Nourish. For easy reference, on screen now are some key examples of Scuttler damage by level. Scuttlers have a duration listed, but their duration is actually a health drain effect to kill them in that time. Any damage from other sources, mainly enemies, will kill your Scuttlers sooner. For this reason, their actual duration will be harshly limited if you aren't controlling enemies with Webbed Embrace. Now, if you're looking at the Scuttler damage and disappointedly comparing to your own weapon damage, you're missing the point. Scuttlers can kill enemies, but that is not their primary goal. Their goal is to distract enemies and soften them up. You see, Oraxia's energy sustained through Mercy's Kiss doesn't work if every enemy dies instantly to your weapon attacks, but you also need all that damage for the strong enemies you face. Scuttlers get around this by applying impact to make mercy kills easier, and toxin to whittle down foes at a rate you can react to. The Scuttlers open up the threshold for Mercy's Kiss, so you don't have to. Lastly then is her fourth, Silken Stride. Oraxia unfurls her large spider-like legs at the cost of her melee, lifting herself up. In doing so, she increases her max health immensely, multiplying all sources of health. She gains immunity from status effects. She gains toxin damage on all primary and secondary weapons that are not in Incarnate mode, applying as a second hit and multiplying with all other damage buffs. She gains indefinite wall latch duration without needing to hold aim, and replaces her dodge animation with a spider silk grapple. This allows her to rapidly relocate, including to walls, ceilings, and even flying enemies. This multi-purpose ability is a damage buff, tank buff, and movement buff all rolled into one. But that does come with some considerations. If you're relying on Incarnate mode or heavy weaponry, the damage buff doesn't exist. If you're not interested in utilizing your health, entirely relying on invisibility and control, the health buff is irrelevant. If you don't intend to hold wall latches, the wall latch buff is irrelevant. If you don't need to be zipping around the map on silken threads, the movement buff is irrelevant. And if you intend to use melee weaponry, the lockout from melee is obviously a negative. All this suggests that her 4 may not always be the right choice to use, and you may consider subsuming it out for niche builds. If you do, I have to ask which frame you actually want to play. There are other frames that grant melee buffs, other frames which buff Incarnate modes, other frames that do invisibility better. The only case I can see is if you're going for a Scuttler damage focus build. Even then, you could just as readily subsume her 1 for Nourish as a combo buff and energy sustain, rather than throw out the multi-purpose buff of her 4. You won't be able to subsume many other damage buffs like Raw over most of her abilities however, as the big damage choices are all mutually exclusive. With the toxin damage on Silken Stride, it too is mutually exclusive with those heavy hitters, forcing abilities like Raw onto the 4th slot. To be quite honest, most Oraxia setups will not need any kind of subsume. So let's consider what we can do with Oraxia. For these builds, I've used Forma simply as I have a lot of them. You, however, won't need to do that. These setups all fit with 5 Forma, using a D polarity, 2 V polarities, and 2 dash polarities. This is my go-to general purpose build. The idea here is to cover the broad spectrum of Oraxia's abilities, while also making full use of her high max health and orb gains. Tank-wise, health conversion turns picked up health orbs into a max of 1,350 armor. This increases Oraxia's damage reduction on armor from 29% to 83%, reducing incoming damage to less than a quarter versus without the mod. Adaptation allows Oraxia to wade through enemies even while visible by ramping up resistance, and otherwise provides enhanced tank against effects that get through invisibility, such as void explosions in some ETA missions. Arcane Blessing massively enhances Oraxia's maximum health. At full stack, she goes from 675 health to 1,875 health, virtually tripling her tank. With the rest of the kit appropriately used, including her 4, this climbs to 7,106 health. Arcane Grace allows Oraxia's healing to keep up with her high health. As she lacks a damage reduction ability and is loath to subsume one, this gives her a healing feature that scales with her health. Taking into account the rest of the setup, Oraxia's tank here can regenerate 2,523 effective hit points per second without adaptation. For comparison, my go-to Lavos build passively regenerates 981 effective hit points per second without adaptation. This Oraxia is 2.5 times tankier than that Lavos. With tank sorted, we've got energy economy covered through Prime Flow and Equilibrium. Prime Flow is essential as Oraxia's energy demands are not small when you actively utilize her kit with a high strength approach. Casting Mercy's Kiss once will cost 38.75 energy, and in a single cast of Webbed Embrace or Widow's Brood for 77.5 energy, that's 116.25 energy cost. Without Prime Flow, leaving her max energy at 200, this would mean she could only spend 83.75 energy on sustaining Silken Stride before running too low on energy to recast her 1. At a drain of 6.08 energy per second, that's just under 14 seconds. While in high enemy density you should be able to maintain, that's still not a lot of buffer to work with, and entirely prohibits further ability casting without continuous spam of Mercy's Kiss. When Prime Flow is added in, she gains 370 max energy. With no other demands on her energy reserves, this increases the Silken Stride time to empty from 14 seconds to 74 seconds. A whole extra minute's worth of energy is a colossal improvement. This makes it safer to regularly use her 2 and 3 as well. To top it off, a successful cast of Mercy's Kiss will generate 5 to 6 health orbs and 1 to 2 energy orbs, not even counting the ones enemies drop normally. With Equilibrium, this is a minimum of 300 energy. Without Prime Flow, you're guaranteed to be wasting energy there. It's not even like the extra orbs would patiently sit on the floor until you're ready. The ongoing energy drain from Silken Stride would make you immediately scoop any spare orbs for almost zero gain. Mod slots are the cheapest and most efficient solution to the problem here, so Prime Flow it is. After tank and economy, we can then afford casting stats. Oraxia loves strength, wants a decent range a lot of the time, and would prefer to have positive duration. That's why I've gone with Blind Rage, Transient Fortitude, Archon Continuity, and Stretch, with a token extra in Cunning Drift. Archon Continuity is exceptional for turning the endless array of toxin procs from Oraxia into also applying Corrosive. Not only does this help reduce enemy armor almost passively, it also is another proc for condition overload type effects to benefit from. In terms of Archon Shards, I strongly recommend using 1 or 2 casting speed shards. This makes Oraxia feel so much snappier to use with the majority of her abilities. It doesn't appear to speed up web slinging, but that's about the only limit. As for the other shard slots, it's mostly user preference. You could use Strength or Duration shards, providing up to 60% bonus if you use 4 Tau Forged. Alternatively, slot in some Violet Orb conversion shards to replace Equilibrium. I will note that taking out Equilibrium for a Strength or Duration mod would not be very efficient when you can use the shards for those stats directly and more effectively. As a final alternative, you can consider starting energy to help Oraxia get going without needing to use Mercy's Kiss straight away. Some shards don't work as fully as you might hope. For example, the Toxin procs from Scuttlers are not boosted by Emerald Shards for Toxin proc damage. As most of Oraxia's ability damage is either from Scuttlers or her one-shot ability, any damage bonuses are actually traps in this case. Even without shards, this go-to overall setup is decently strong at 279% max strength, resilient at up to 420,000 effective health, and is very cozy to use. But cozy isn't for everyone. Let's specialise. First, a Scuttlers focused approach to make them more of our damage output. This calls for higher duration to help them stay out longer, and dropping our tanks substantially to accommodate Scuttler arcanes, for which there aren't many. The most useful are Arcane Camisado and Theorem Infection. Camisado will increase the Scuttler's speed and otherwise give you a strength boost on your next ability cast after they've attacked, stacking with multiple attacks. As Scuttlers attack really fast, it's easy to get full value out of this arcane. It doesn't buff Scuttler damage with that strength, but is still useful for orb drops, webbing vulnerability, and Silken Stride buffs. Theorem Infection will buff the Scuttler damage and by a lot, but it requires setup. Full disclosure, I am not a fan of this arcane and method, but that doesn't make it less useful if you can maintain its conditions. Theorem Infection will give your Scuttlers up to 360% elemental damage, the type based on the residual arcane you have equipped on a weapon. Residual arcanes only go onto Kitguns, and then have a low 20% activation chance per kill with the Kitgun. You will need to do killing yourself, and plenty of it, to buff Scuttlers this way. When triggered, the residual arcane makes an unmarked 10 meter area which, aside from smaller forgettable benefits, will allow your Theorem arcane to stack up. It stacks once per second, up to the 15 max stacks, lasted for 20 seconds on leaving the invisible radius. As Kitguns are a little, well, power crept by now, this is not the most useful triggering condition, and is the core of my issue with it. But again, if you can get the kills and can hang around the unmarked areas consistently enough for your Scuttlers, it's a seriously high damage bonus for them. Do note that the Theorem buff is considered a modded elemental buff. This will make the element combine with Scuttler innate toxin, either replacing it with gas, viral or corrosive if you don't use the toxin residual arcane. This may be a benefit to you, but usually will be a damage cost. Stick to residual viremia. The rest of the build is focused again on tank, economy, and casting. Adaptation is replaced with vitality as we've had to drop Arcane Blessing, while transient fortitude is replaced with Augur Message. I've also opted to slot in preparation as this build wants enough energy immediately to get the Scuttlers going, without waiting on that first Mercy's Kiss kill. You can easily drop that for Cunning Drift if preferred, or if you're using the starting energy Archon Shard. The Aura is swapped out too for Summoner's Wrath. This provides a 75% damage bonus to the Scuttlers directly, and a further 75% bonus to their status damage. This makes the Toxin procs a total of 206% more damaging. Of all the builds, this is the one most welcoming of a subsume. You can replace either the 1 or 4 with Nourish to viral buff the Scuttlers. Replacing the 1 will weaken your energy economy, but Nourish partially fixes that. Replacing the 4 means much lower health, much lower mobility, and lower damage on your Kitgun or other weapons. Choose carefully if this is worth it to you. Utilising this setup fully means ensuring you're at 10 Scuttlers near enough all the time, and keeping Theorem Infection at full stacks with Kitgun kills. Webbed Embrace will be all but required to give Scuttlers their best damage output. Next build, we can go a more controlling route with maximum range. Tank has dropped even lower here, but I still recommend keeping health conversion for the significant EHP increase to deal with stray attacks and environmental damage. Otherwise, we retain our core mods for economy and basic casting, enhanced otherwise with every single range bonus mod. At 280% range, we have some crazy capabilities. Mercy's Kiss has a leap range of 112 meters. Webbed Embrace has a 28 meter radius for a 2,463 square meter coverage, while Silken Stride can now sling up to 210 meters away. Even if you don't use this for control purposes, that's just a lot of fun to use on open worlds. While the modded strength may look low at 139%, in truth it's a lot higher. Fully stacked with Growing Power, Arcane Crepuscular, and Molt Augmented, this has an extra 115% strength hiding in those conditionals, for a full 254% strength. Webbed enemies will be held at a comfortable distance and take over double damage as a result. The core idea is simple. Play Oraxia as normal, but with a much higher focus on huge trapping zones to protect any objective. Just don't use this in a mission with Mass Overguard or Xmas spawns, or your range will be worth naught against such situations. Lastly, we return to the all-rounder approach, but with the demand to ignore any kind of health tanking. I get it, why health tank when you can be invisible with just a quick wall latch? Removing the tank arcanes and mods, we have room for Augur Reach for more range and shield gate refreshing, Precision Intensify for a staggeringly strong strength buff on the 4, and Proton Pulse, replacing Cunning Drift for a little less range but a lot more bullet jump speed. Our arcanes are now Arcane Crepuscular and Bellicose. This gives a general strength of 369% on the first 3 abilities, 415% on Silken Stride for its health gain, and 459% for Silken Stride's Toxin bonus. The health gain isn't as high because it's not updated constantly. Arcane Bellicose can't buff the health as much because you don't yet have the health to buff Bellicose itself. The strength is significantly higher than the tank setup, giving you much more power from the relevant abilities. However, it does not grant you much wiggle room in case of stray shots or forgetting to be invisible. While in Silken Stride and Wall Latching, your effective health is 5,932. Without Wall Latch, that drops to 4,924, and without Silken Stride, it drops again to just 956. That is a stiff breeze away from this spider being flushed down the spout. If you keep your invis and control up, you'll be fine. If you don't, or face an enemy that can hit you despite being invisible, it'll hurt. Between these options then, this gives Oraxia her wide set of options for cozy gameplay, maximise strength, maximise range, or go full broodmother. Due to not buffing Incarna modes while using her 4, and taking odd firing angles with her wall latching, I recommend wide body projectile weapons like the Forma and Archoplasm more. They can benefit greatly from status afflicted enemies due to how the galvanized damage mods work, and otherwise are easier to use than precision weapons. As for Companion, anything that can make use of Synth Deconstruct can help yet further support Oraxia's energy economy. A Hound setup for high status output like this can be an amazing passive support, could go alongside those wide body projectile weapons and Oraxia's love of health orbs. With all this combined, you should be able to get some incredible results of Oraxia. That is, if you can put the whole skittering sound out of mind. That's all from me on this frame, so as always, spin webs, crush plebs, and fight well, Tenno.